Hey everybody, and welcome to our PyData meetup. We're just about to get started. I hope you can hear me. While we get sorted out, I would encourage you to have a look around the Zoom menu if you haven't already. For the question and answers during the talks, and afterwards we'll use the questions and answers box. So if you have a question during or after the talk, feel free to post it. Likewise, there should be a chat window somewhere that you can use to introduce yourself and leave a message to reach out. So we have at least one person that can hear me, which is great. So that means we can get started. So once again, yeah, welcome to our meetup. We have a couple of great talks for you tonight. Sorry, I'm just dragging around the Zoom windows on my screen. We have two speakers today. Ellie Bowler from the University of East Anglia is going to talk to us about using deep learning to count albatrosses from space. And then we'll have a short session for questions and answers. And then we'll have a talk by Laís Carvalho, who's going to talk to us about going from Jupyter notebooks to production code using Kedro. Before we dive into the meat of the evening, we have a couple of announcements that we want to run by you. So as you probably are aware, we are the Cambridge chapter of the PyData group of meetups. We've been going strong since November 2018, so we're almost due our second anniversary. And we hold monthly meetups like the one that you're attending now every last Wednesday of the month. We used to be at the Raspberry Pi building near the Cambridge railway station, but of course, now we are online. And apart from myself, so I'm Joris, apart from myself, there are three other volunteers that organize the meetup. There's Federico, Leandro, and Ole. Ole is here with me in the meetup, and he will help to streamline the question and answers and answer any questions you may have.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Ole. With that in mind, a little bit about our main parent organization, NumFOCUS. So, as I mentioned, we're part of the PyData group of meetups. PyData is sponsored by the NumFOCUS organization that tries to promote open code to basically promote better science. And NumFOCUS does a number of things, apart from the meetups and the conferences that you might have attended. It also sponsors a lot of the open source packages that you use and know and love. So if you agree with the mission of NumFOCUS, please consider donating, or at least keeping an eye out for news from NumFOCUS. We have a code of conduct that governs our meetup, both in person and online. It is basically what you expect. Be kind, be professional, don't insult or put down other people, and behave as you would like to be treated with. If you feel that you have an issue that falls under the code of conduct that you want to discuss, you can reach out to us, the organizers of the meetup, or to Leonie Munk, whose email address is given at the bottom of the page. So if there's something that you feel more comfortable discussing with someone who's not an organizer, feel free to reach out to Leonie. And then before we dive in, a quick shout out and a big thanks to our sponsors. So we currently have a number of corporate sponsors. I've already mentioned NumFOCUS. We're also very grateful to Raspberry Pi, who used to host us in the flesh when there was such a thing. And then we have ARM as our corporate sponsor and Fetch.ai. ARM has a couple of job postings that we want to run by you. If you're interested in any of those, you can visit the ARM corporate careers page or talk to, in this case via Meetup, to Federico or Leandro. And then a couple of announcements for events that may keep you occupied while away your time under lockdown. So there's the PyData Global Conference that's taking place the second week of November. The call for proposals for that conference has closed, but you can still purchase tickets. And anybody who's attended the PyData Cambridge or London conferences in the past probably knows that they're chock full of interesting and novel stuff. And the PyData Global Conference will be no exception, I'm sure. And it has the benefit of bringing together a lot of people with the same goals as yourself in an online platform. And then we have two smaller events that may be of interest to you. So from tomorrow on, the Hacktoberfest starts. So you can support open source by creating a number of contributions. And if you're within the first 70,000 people to do so, you'll get a free t-shirt or the opportunity to plant a tree, courtesy of DigitalOcean. Some of the open source packages in the scientific Python universe, like scikit-image, I think, and SciPy and Pandas, have sprints and tickets that you can contribute to. So be sure to check that out. And then there was another online hackathon that caught our attention, Hack Hate 2020. This one starts the 11th of October. You can find more information at the link below, but it's more of a conventional hackathon in the sense that you assemble teams online to work on a specific problem, then you code for a couple of weeks, and then there's a final round where your work gets evaluated. So be sure to check those out if they are of interest. And last but not least, we're always looking for more speakers and for sponsors. So you can reach out to us on Twitter at PyDataCambridge and via email at pydatacambridge@gmail.com. In particular, if you have an idea for a talk but you don't feel confident or you want to run it by us to see if it's appropriate, do not hesitate to contact us. We're happy to talk, and we're happy to help you develop a proposal into something that's that can be presented to the meetup. And with that, I'm officially at the end of my little chat. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll turn the floor over to the speakers. So the first speaker that we have tonight is Ellie Bowler. So as I already mentioned, Ellie is a PhD student at the University of East Anglia, and she's going to talk to us about deep learning and tracing albatrosses. So, Ellie, I don't know if you can share your screen.
Yeah, can you hear me at the moment?
Yes, I can hear you
okay.
Loud and clear.
Good.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, so share screen. I think it's saying host disabled participant sheet screen sharing.
I will click around and could you try again? I've clicked on various buttons.
Yes, that working?
Yes, great.
Okay. Sorry, I haven't actually presented on Zoom yet, so
That's all right. This is also my first Zoom meeting hosting.
Can you see the main screen, or is it still on?
We can still see presenter mode.
Okay. I would just do it like, I'm sorry. No, that didn't work. There you go. Is that working now?
Yes.
I'm sorry, everyone. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. It's really nice to join the meetup. So, like we were saying, my name's Ellie. I'm a PhD student at the University of East Anglia. And I was just going to give a bit of an overview of my project I've been working on, which is an application of deep learning and computer vision for ecological monitoring of albatrosses. So I was just going to quickly introduce people that I'm working with at UEA. So my main supervisor is Mikhail Maskiewicz, who's worked a lot in colour science, and he's sort of branching into a lot of more ecological monitoring projects, as well as Jeff French, who's our sort of deep learning go-to guy. And then my project's co-supervised at the British Antarctic Survey over in Cambridge. So my main supervisor there is Peter Fretwell, who is a bit of a kind of pioneer of this counting wildlife from space, sort of loads of different animals, and he runs a lot of different projects. And a couple of other students are Hannah, who's working on counting whales from space, and Prem, who's looking at seals. But today I'm going to talk about albatrosses, which are just, infinitely better. So I thought I would just give a bit of background about albatrosses to say why we're interested in counting them. So albatrosses are a really unique and very charismatic species. They've got the largest wingspan of any living bird, which is up to 3.5 meters. And they use these wings to sort of glide around very strong aerial currents around the Southern Ocean. So they live almost entirely on the wing, hardly ever come to land apart from when they're nesting, which is every 2 years. So they're really incredible animals, but unfortunately, like a lot of wildlife, they do face a number of threats. So this is a very depressing slide, but the albatrosses are actually the most threatened of any bird species. So a lot of this is to do with longline fishing activity. So they get drawn in by these trawlers and caught up in hooks when they're fishing for tuna, mostly. And they're also under threat from these sort of supersized mice, which are predating on the chicks, particularly on Gough Island. And in Blue Planet 2, they had an example of where the chicks were also being fed plastic, which had been washed up in the ocean. So there's a lot of pressures on albatrosses, and this has led to a lot of concern over their conservation and enhanced sort of measures for trying to monitor populations and check up on their health and also inform conservation action. But one of the problems with monitoring albatrosses is that they nest in extreme and remote locations. So this map shows the main nesting sites of wandering albatrosses, which is the main species that I'm looking at. So as you can see, they're sort of got a circumpolar distribution. They're really very remote islands, quite extreme weather conditions. It can be very dangerous, expensive, or just very impractical to access the islands to conduct surveys on foot, which they've traditionally done. And And so it's also very expensive. So it means that a lot of locations, there's very little monitoring. And so there's not a very good understanding of actually how many there are in different locations, which sort of limits our ability to properly inform conservation efforts. And so these challenges really led people to ask whether there was another way that we could survey the albatrosses without physically having to go to these remote rocks in the Southern Ocean. And one of the potential solutions was using very high resolution satellites. So this is sort of the newest generation of satellite imaging, which can sample at anything under 50 centimeters. So there's a lot of benefits of using satellites, and they're obviously already really widely used for monitoring all sorts of sort of landscape scale processes. They're really useful in that they offer global coverage, so we can get images of these really remote locations without having to go there. Particularly for wildlife monitoring, a big benefit is they're obviously non-invasive, so you can get an image and you're not disturbing the wildlife or the environment that they live in. And you can also get these sort of permanent visual records, which are really useful because you can sort of compare your results with different people. You have something sort of, you can look at different ways of analysing it later down the line, rather than perhaps in a traditional survey where you make field notes, but it's maybe not so comparable across different studies. And so the satellite that we're particularly looking at is currently the highest resolution commercially available imagery, which is from the WorldView 3. So this is run by Maxar, which is a digital globe company. It was launched in 2014, and it offers imagery at a 30 centimeter resolution ground sample distance. So roughly each pixel in the image represents about the size of a sheet of paper. So it's obviously incredibly detailed, and it's used a lot for a lot of different applications. But obviously the one that we were most interested in is whether we could see albatrosses in the newly launched satellite. So this was a study that my supervisor, Peter, over at the Antarctic Survey carried out in 2017. And he was looking to see whether it was possible to identify wandering and also northern royal albatrosses in the WorldView 3 imagery. And the answer of could we see them was yes, just about. So this is an image of a wandering albatross taken from space. So it's not maybe the most exciting looking image. But in terms of doing surveys, it was quite exciting because you can just about make them out as these sort of 4 to 5 pixel white dots against their green nesting habitat. So that was kind of a bit of a background of can we see them? The next question though is how do we count them? And so currently this is mostly done manually. So you would get your very large satellite image and load it into usually a program like ArcMap and come up with a method for dividing it and tracking where you've gone, and then just click on any white dot which you interpret to be an albatross. So there's obviously a lot of limitations with these methods. It's very time consuming. I think even if you really, really like albatrosses, it does get a little bit boring. It's quite error prone, and really importantly, and something that I'll come back to, is that it's highly subjective because there's a huge amount of uncertainty over what you're looking at. Albatrosses look a lot like rocks at 30 centimeter resolution, and so each different person tends to produce a different set of labels. So it's not very standardized method, and it creates a kind of bottleneck if you want to roll out these satellite surveys over larger areas or at more frequent intervals, which we'd ideally do. And so the aim of this project really is to try and automate this counting method and see if we can sort of streamline the process a bit more. And so to do that, we wanted to try and see if we could use the sort of latest deep learning approaches. So I've done this as the 3 stages I went to. I was quite new to deep learning and machine learning in general when I started the project. So this is how I sort of break it down in my mind. So the first step that we did was build a data set. So one of the challenges with this field is it's very emerging and quite new. So there's not extensive data sets, surprisingly, of high resolution albatrosses. So we built this one, which is 4 separate colonies, which are dotted all over the Southern Ocean. So the images were collected at different times of year, different times of day. So there's quite a lot of variation in them. And these were manually analysed, just the way I was showing before, by an expert at the Antarctic Survey. So the same person annotated all of these 4 images and gave a total count. And so I think altogether we've got about 2,000 examples of albatrosses across the 4 images, which is a fairly decent number of examples to try train some deep learning methods. And so once we'd built the data set, we then wanted to come up with and train a network. So the architecture that we went for was quite a simple UNet architecture and a segmentation method. This had been successful with someone else, Jeff French, in the group who'd worked on a similar project, and so we thought we'd test it out on this data set. We used transfer learning, so we used some of the feature maps from VGG16 pre-trained on ImageNet, and then we also, quite importantly, used a focal loss as the criteria to optimize. This is because it's probably quite clear in the data set there's a huge amount of imbalance. So in terms of pixels within the image, you know, a tiny fraction are actually albatrosses. It's mostly background. And so to overcome that, we use the focal loss criterion, which places more weight on the sparse and sort of rare examples and less on easy to classify background. And so in terms of the data set as well, we divided it into patches because the total satellite image is very large. It's about 30,000 pixels square for most of the images. And so we divided them into sort of smaller 400 square patches just to put through the network. Is that a Q&A? How do you differentiate waves from albatrosses? They look both away from the image. Oh yeah, so the, sorry, I should have said, so where we're looking at the albatrosses, we're trying to count the nesting albatrosses. So even though there might be albatrosses over the water, we're sort of ignoring that and focusing on the land where they're nesting. So thanks for the question. And so, yes, so that's what we did for the network. Then once we trained the network end to end, it was time to look at some results, which is, so yeah, we sort of looked to put through the patches and to true positive, false negative, recall precision, and then by thresholding at different probabilities, we calculated our recall precision curve for the entire data set, which looked like this on the data set that we started with. So as we can see, it's sort of, for initial run, we thought it was quite successful. It gets maybe at best around 80% recall and 80% precision on the albatrosses. So we thought it was quite encouraging, but obviously there was some room for improvement. So we were getting about 20% error either way. So when we saw these results, we had a look through and the sort of rogues gallery and tried to see if we could see any patterns on what the network was missing or what it was maybe accidentally highlighting, which didn't look like an albatross. And we quickly realized from scanning through the data set that actually identifying whether it was actually a true positive or a false positive or a false negative was almost impossible because they all looked very much like albatrosses. And this brought us back to really realizing that we needed to properly look at the observer confidence. So we were using one person set of labels but actually another person might have annotated them differently. And so that was something that I realized after reading the literature is something that comes up really quite frequently, this uncertainty in your ground truth. I think one of the earliest examples I found was of this paper by Smith in '95, which was annotating pictures of volcanoes on Venus. And that presents a method for sort of combining observer uncertainty and subjective labeling. And then another topic where it comes up very frequently is in medical image analysis. So whether doctors would maybe classify something as a mild, moderate, severe, it's not exactly gold standard defined absolute truth, it's very subjective. And so we needed to factor in this subjective interpretation into our own data set. And so to do this, we just conducted some experiments where we asked some very willing volunteers to click on lots of white dots, which was very nice of them. And yes, we set up an experimental room as well at UEA. So they all labeled it under the same conditions. They were given the same information prior, and we just wanted to see how much they agreed. And so that's what the experimental protocol looked like in ArcMap. Some of the key questions we wanted to determine were whether people agreed, whether there was a more agreement for some images than other. So from the four pictures that we had, I think you can see in these examples, sometimes the albatrosses are much better contrasting to their background. Like in Apotres Island, the background's quite green, and so they stand out quite clearly, whereas in others where the habitat's a bit yellower, they're a bit harder to distinguish. So we expected that probably there'd be more uncertainty for some images than others. Then we wanted to go back and look at a network, and given our new understanding of how well humans perform on the data set, we can more accurately or assess the results of the network within the context of human accuracy, rather than expecting it to achieve 100%. And then we also want to consider a bit about, now that we've got a lot of different labels, which ones should we really use, or how can we combine these different labels in the best way. And so looking at some of the results from the inter-observer experiment, we did find that there was quite a lot more agreement for some islands than others. So Apotres Island, we found that the overall counts were fairly consistent, whereas for some, in Bird Island, for example, we had a range of 600 to nearly 1,000. So there was really quite a lot of difference. Obviously, total counts don't show the whole picture because that's just the total number. It doesn't look at whether, you know, they could have labeled 100 completely separate points. So then this histogram shows the amount of overlap or agreement between those points. So the fraction of annotations that were labeled by at least one person, so which is obviously 100%, and then at least 2, at least 3, at least 4. And this showed us that, again, as we can see, the Apotres Island had much higher agreement, even at all 6 annotators agreed on, you know, roughly 70% of the data, whereas for Bird Island, or particularly the most extreme was Apotres, where around 50% they were only labeled by 1 or 2 people. So there was a lot of uncertainty over a large proportion of our ground truth. So then we also wanted to look at a bit more specifically how much agreement there was between individual analysts rather than sort of averaging it out. And so to do this, we sort of imagined that our reference observer, for example, had given an absolute ground truth, and then we could look at how well each of the other observers matched that imagined ground truth in terms of recall and precision. So imagining that this observer 1 was trying to predict the labels that reference observer had given. And so that let us look at sort of the accuracy between observers, which we used as the F1 score. And if we took the average over all of those results, this gave us a mean average for the entire image. So for Bird Island, it was 0.74. And so we just did that for each of the other islands as well. And again, we found that Apotres had much higher agreement, around 90%, when averaged over all of the observers. And using this data, we kind of then went back and looked at the results from the network to place them a bit more in context. So these graphs, I think, maybe I just wanted to explain a bit what they were. So from those tables, we just sort of went back a step, and rather than plotting F1, we plotted it as the recall precision points in the recall precision graph. So this just shows us the spread of observer agreement. Obviously, the colors do kind of correspond to each observer's ground truth, but it's not so important. It's more just showing the ballpark area we should be aiming for with the network performance. And so for all 4 of the islands, those results look like this. So you can see Apotres is really tightly clustered towards the 90% agreement mark. So that would be where we were aiming to get with the network. And so we then slightly retrain the network in a cross-validation way. So we trained on 3 islands and just tested on the remaining unseen island to give us, you know, remove bias in the data set. And the results from that network look like this, using the reference observers. So our original observer from the Antarctic surveys labels as our ground truth. And we can see here that the Bird Island results, even though they were only in the 80% mark, actually do fall within the range of human accuracy, which was encouraging. So for some of the islands, though, we didn't get such high, so close to the observers. So, and then, of course, slightly missed the mark, Apotres as well. So this sort of gave us somewhere a starting point, really, to look at how well the network was achieving. But it's also not the full picture, because now we have not just one person's labels, but 5 additional people's labels. And since we're training using supervised methods, we can obviously use those labels both at the training and also at the assessment stage. And that's going to have an impact on the performance of the network as well. And so then just initially we wanted to look at leaving the network exactly the same as it is and trained on the reference observers labels. How much would our assessment of the performance differ if we just chose any of the other ground truths as our sort of gold standard ground truth? So here we've used the reference observers labels, and this shows the results when we used any of the different people's labels. And so the same, exactly the same network trained on the reference observers labels would give us quite different results. Yes, Maori's face, I think. I don't know how to do that, sorry.
I'm sorry, what are you trying to do? I didn't catch it.
Oh, sorry, I just saw someone raise their hand, but I wasn't sure.
Ah.
It's gone now, I'm not sure. Sorry, I can carry on.
Sorry, attendees unfortunately cannot use audio. So if you have a question, you need to type them in the chat or into the Q&A window. So feel free to ask there. Okay, looks that was a mistake, so we can carry on.
Yes, so the sorry, I just where I was. Oh yeah, so this is just we could see that there was quite a lot of variation, purely depending on the ground truth we used to assess the network performance. And so, for example, for this image in the bottom left, if we were using the reference observer's ground truth, we would have not scored as well as the the observer agreement, if we just chose someone else's ground truth to assess the results, it would have fallen within the range. And then we had a little bit of a look about how we could combine the labels from the different observers rather than just using individuals. So ways of doing that was a few different ways we looked at. We're using the intersection, so only accepting points which are labeled by all 6 observers. We could use a majority kind of vote, so if it was labeled by 3 or more, for example, or we could look at the union and just take any point which is labeled by any observer. So there's a lot of different examples that we could look at for combining the ground truth labels from different annotators. And that's one of the future questions that we were going to look at as well, is that was sort of analysing it in terms of the assessment stage, but we'd be quite interested to look at how it affects the network at the training stage as well. So whether it's best to use an expert's ground truth labels, the intersection, the majority, the union. We could obviously also make a probabilistic ground truth. So assign a probability rather than a binary, 100% this is an albatross point. And that would be something interesting to look at. Sorry, that is a Q&A now.
Thank you.
I don't know whether to answer the questions now or carry on. Should I do them at the end, or?
I think maybe it's up to you, I would say. If you think now is a good point to answer the question, feel free to do it, or just wait until you're done. It's up to you.
Okay. I'll answer now then. So will it be possible to get more subjective free ground truth from the albatross, for instance, cost information from the suspect with training footage? Is it possible that the portraits had a better quality? Yes. So I think in the questions, one of the things I forgot to mention was that some of the images, the image quality does vary a little bit. Sorry, I'm so not used to this Zoom thing. I think I might finish the talk and then do the questions at the end. If that's all right.
Sure, that's no problem.
So I think I've only got a couple of slides left anyway. Oh yeah, so then quick additions that we were looking at to try and improve the results to push it towards the human performance was one of the images. I think this might have been one of the questions as well. Some of the image quality does vary a bit. So for example, the portraits image has some cloud cover in it. And while there's cloud cover, it's still possible to just about see albatrosses underneath. So that meant that the observers annotated it, but when the network saw the examples, it generally failed at picking up under the cloud, because there wasn't really any examples of that in the training data set. So one way we could potentially overcome that is try use some augmentation at the training phase. So some people have used this thing called Perlin noise to sort of generate pretend cloud over training patches, which might help us deal with the cloud cover problem in some of the images. And then another thing we wanted to look at was trying to build in some sort of ecological factors into the training. So use, for example, prior knowledge to exclude areas which are unlikely to have albatrosses, which would remove some of these false positives we got in this image, which had a lot of rocks, which look, again, a lot like albatrosses, but which are on too steep a slope to actually have any nesting there. So we could potentially look at building in elevation models or habitat models to try and reduce the search area. And then finally, I just wanted to mention some, I think, quite exciting developments in these kind of projects. More recently, is there being sort of slightly scaled up through crowdsourcing, which I think is quite interesting. So there's been a really big project looking at seals over the entire Antarctic coastline, and quite a well-known one called Penguin Watch, which is run out of University of Oxford. And one thing that is really useful about these kind of crowdsourcing platforms is that you can just upload the image, or Maxar in fact have one called GeoHive, so they can upload the satellite image directly to this interface. So there's no need for the sort of researcher to download huge amounts of imagery, which is also a limiting factor. And you can also raise public awareness for the conservation efforts by encouraging crowds and schools, and sort of generate quite a lot of public engagement by running these activities. And again, it feeds into the sort of crowdsourcing observer uncertainty stuff. So I think that's a really exciting thing to look out for, because it allows you to process a lot more imagery and also obviously have a benefit for conservation as well. And I think that it's then all I've got. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ellie, for that wonderful talk. So I think we have a couple of minutes for questions, and just as a reminder, you can post questions in the Q&A box, and Ellie can answer them as we go along. There might be too many to answer. If that's the case, it's also possible to give an offline answer typed during the next talk, but we'll see how far we get.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so one of the questions, I don't know if you can see them as well, about the asking the reference observer to reanalyze the data at a later date. That's something that was done in the original study, and there is this aspect of, I think it's rather than inter-observer, it's intra-observer. So it's true that if the same person analyzes it twice, they do produce different counts as well. So there's another source of uncertainty there. Looking at how data changes over time. Yeah, and that's another thing that would be interesting to look at, how the data changes over time. So at the moment, we're a bit limited with the number of images we have, but gradually, hopefully, you'll build up repeat images of the same area. So that could help us look at what's static in the landscape, like the rocks, and what appears at different types of the season, which would be the albatrosses. And then it also allows you to look at quite a lot of different stuff in terms of the ecology as well. So rather than just doing the surveys and getting a count, you can maybe look at, the phenology of when certain birds are appearing and when they're disappearing within the season, which apparently is something ecologists are interested in as well. And yeah, in terms of, I think it's the last one I have time for probably. So linking it to drone footage and sort of ground counts. One of the, in the original study, and when it's possible, we sort of use the field survey results from a well-studied colony. So in this data set, Bird Island is actually, there's a permanent research station there, so they constantly monitor the nests there on the ground, and so that information was used to validate the methods initially. So in some well-monitored colonies, we can sort of say, okay, we can link this to GPS data, and we know that it's roughly within the ballpark, and that gives us some more confidence that we can apply it to different islands which aren't possible to access by humans or drones. So.
Great, thank you very much. If there are any follow-up questions, feel free to post them. And Ellie, if you are around for the next talk and you have the bandwidth to answer them, we can make that work.
Yeah.
So cross these off as done. And then with that, it's time for our next speaker. So thank you very much, Ellie, once again. So our next speaker is Lais Carvalho, who's going to talk to us about moving from Jupyter notebooks to production codes, a Kedro introduction. And Lais is a developer advocate for Quantum Black and an IT student with a background in civil and environmental engineering, and also a co-organizer of EuroPython 2020 and the Python PyData Dublin conference. So someone who is also no stranger to the PyData universe. So with that, Lais, if you could share your screen.
Absolutely. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you, Ellie, for your talk. Really, really cool. I did not know that you could do that with deep learning. So interesting. Thank you so much. And yes, with no further ado, let me just do this here. And cool. So can you see my sharing screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. Cool. So let's start then. So good evening, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. I'm not keeping track of the chat or the questions, so I will just save everything for later on, if that's okay for everyone, of course. And cool. So let me just position you here. Wonderful. So let's start. Perfect. So I will be talking tonight to you about Jupyter, moving from Jupyter notebooks into production code, a Kedro introduction. So with no further ado, let's start this. Perfect. So first of all, who am I and why am I here talking to you? My name is Lais Carvalho. As we was said already, I'm a developer advocate for Quantum Black in London. I mean, right now I'm working from home. But the company is in London still. I'm streaming from Dublin. So I'm doing my final year on IT as an undergrad. Then my background is in civil and environmental engineering, and I have some experience with customer service as well. I joined Quantum Black in June, so I've been part of the team for not that long. And I'm responsible for hosting the PyData Dublin season, the summer season, the last one of online meetups. Then I'm a board member of Python Ireland, and I'm also a member of the EuroPython Society. I've been elected like 2 weeks ago. So yeah, it's fresh news. Then my contact is over there as well, if you fancy getting in contact with me after all. Cool. So what are we planning for today? So first of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Quantum Black and what we do. Then I will walk you through some of the problems that are around today on data science, on the data science field. Then I will show you a solution for them. At least I'm going to try and show you a solution for them. Then I'm going to give you a demo that is basically going to be a simple conversion for from Jupyter Notebook into a Kedro project. And then we're going to have time to do some Q&A as well. Cool. So let me tell you about QB then. So we are an advanced analytics company born out of Formula One. But what does that actually mean? And so what it means is that our co-founders used to do high-performance race car analytics. And then one day they decided to apply those principles to businesses. And that's how QB was born. We've been acquired by McKinsey something around 4 years ago. And so, yeah, we're a McKinsey unit. And I'm part of the Quantum Black Labs. That is basically the product engineering part of QB. And that's the home for Kedro. That's what Kedro came from. And I'll be talking a little bit more about Kedro to you in just a moment. Cool. So then let's go then. The problem. Let me tell you this story. So Elsa and Anna are two data scientists that are working at the same team. They're involving in this new project analyzing a weather station in Singapore. Elsa wrote all her code in a notebook, an initial standard stuff using her laptop, and data is stored remotely, but like simply remotely, let's say Dropbox. Everything works great, awesome. So then she sends in her notebook and a link for the data by email. Anna then tries to pick up the project a little bit earlier in the week, but she can't. So she ends up only having a look at everything on Friday at 5 p.m. She managed to actually access the notebook, but she runs into an issue when loading the data. She tries then to contact Elsa, just to find out that Elsa is now on holidays until Tuesday. And while they can communicate, the project is on hold. Well, by the end of the day, everything is fine. They managed to get in contact and everything works, but collaboration is a little bit time consuming and it needs to be done in real time. So it's kind of hard. Then it's 2 years later now, and the team has grown. They're now 6 people. But the problems that they're facing before seems to continue. So despite the larger team, the projects are still not being completed on time. And well, now they have this thing that the project folder is actually quite messy to the volume of scripts that they had, that the entire team kind of shares. So any complex project now becomes this very, very long notebook with hard-coded files, and it's simply a nightmare. Well, because of this very long notebook, only one person can work on a project at a time, and there is absolutely zero consistency on how to develop that actual framework, how to actually get everyone working together with the same standards. Additionally, it's very hard to find the code to reuse it, and it requires everyone that is working on the project to keep a mental overview of their of what's going on at all times. So that kind of makes everything a little bit challenging and frustrating to work. And then they just got some great news. Their boss just came over and said, I'm going to need this project being deployed into a production environment. Dun, dun, dun. So now we have several different folders. Everyone has their own scripts and their own way of working. And well, you can imagine how messy this can get. Now, they are going to try to deploy this to production. So the problem then becomes migrating from experimentation phase to deployment means another huge project and loads of code to be rewritten, increasing the risk of actually breaking things and spending even more time on debugging and refactoring. And well, this also brings the whole fact of you start experimenting and then you go into deployment phase and then you analyze what was deployed, and then maybe it wasn't necessarily that that was supposed to be done. Then you go back to experimentation and then you do deployment again. And this transition, if each one of these transitions takes weeks, there is a high chance that this project is never going to be finished. And well, today, if a business cannot finish project quickly enough, that's not really going to survive in a fast-moving competition. Instead of that cyclical graph, you would be looking then for something ideally that would be done like this. A linear workflow instead, where the goal would be to build an effective system that goes from data consumption, so ingestion of data on the left-hand side, to module evaluation. And that's where all the attention is spent on the model. So in practical terms, writing good code from the start to make sure that all that code, there is a mess now, scales easily. And it's easy to be put into production. And it needs minimal modifications from research and development, the famous R&D phase, into production. And well, less time is spent on modifying the code to fit into production environment. It's more time that can be invested into model optimization and code optimization to build constraints and etc. Cool. So then here I have a real world explanation on how to write good code. So we start the project, and then there is always that question: do we do things fast or do we do things right? Well, if you're a data scientist, you're probably going to choose to do things fast. That's how most of you work. If you do things fast, well, you're going to keep doing things fast until they work. And they're kind of like almost going to work, but it's going to be a mess of files and folders. And it's probably going to generate some spaghetti code. Then if you go to the other side, well, you can do things right and you can do everything well. You can write your code well. There is no guarantee that your requirements won't change. I cannot guarantee that, but well, if that happens, instead of training it all out and starting all over again, you can reuse your code, and that would help you to get into good code finally, which is the goal after all. Cool. So then that's the end of the story. So just to summarize the problems that we faced on that story there. So we had team collaboration it's challenging when everything is on one long Jupyter notebook. Code written in notebooks are very hard to scale. You cannot deploy a notebook into production. It's rewriting that code is required. Once you start rewriting that code, things can break. On top of that, outputs are very less reproducible when you're running the same code on different machines if you're using notebooks. So the whole concept of reproducibility simply does not exist. It's that idea of how do I make sure that the code that I'm seeing right here on my local machine right now is going to run on my friends, on my coworkers, on my friend's notebook, on his own computer. And then I just want to clarify that when I'm talking production ready code, I'm not only talking about the code, I'm talking about the other facets to it as well, like testing, logging, continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous training, documentation, etc., etc. Cool. So what is the solution? This solution then is Kedro. But what is Kedro? So Kedro is this open source Python framework that helps teams build data pipelines. They're robust, consistent, scalable, deployable, and reproducible. Well, basically that means that we use software engineering principles to structure your data science and machine learning project. We believe that if everyone has a standard way of working together, the team can quickly get up to speed on what is actually necessary for the project, instead of spending time dwelling on what is it that needs to be done between us. And well, Kedro allows your team and your project to grow, enabling scalability from a single user to that so desired production environment. So the way Kedro is structured is basically, here I struggle a little bit. I never know to say if it's 4 or 5 parts, but you can decide. So we have a project template that is based on cookie cutter data science. We based our project in inspirations from projects done with more than 80 different cookie cutter data science projects. We have a configuration that is basically configuration everywhere that allows you to not hard code your file paths anymore, and make sure that everything runs not only locally, but in the cloud or in production environment without the major changes. And then the thing that allows us to do this is the data catalog. That is basically a YAML file that works as a data connector. So you just put you just hard code. You code your file paths in that YAML file, and then every time that the Kedro project is going to run, it's going to look on that data on the catalog.yaml first, see where your data is, and then run from there. We also have another file to put your credentials in that doesn't get pushed to GitHub, so that's quite important as well. And then the meat of the business, that are nodes and pipelines. So nodes are basically pure Python functions that have an input and an output. And then a pipeline is a DAG. So it's basically a collection of those nodes with dependencies and relationships on them. yeah, if there's any questions that you think that are urgent and need to be sorted out right now, just let me know. Cool. So one of the things that we say is we understand it's not that cool to just walk in and say, hey, listen, we do everything much better. Come to our side. So we try to use empathy to tweak your workflow to make sure that everyone has the same standard and are working together and are collaborating effectively. And that sentence is from our core software, one of the core engineers of Kedro. She's quite cool. Cool. So I prepared a demo for us today. Then, so here we go. That's the link for the demo there. I don't know if we're gonna have time enough to grab it, but I'm gonna change the screen right now. Dun, dun, dun. So, cool. So I don't know. Is everyone still able to see me? Everything okay?
Yes, I can see the screen.
Cool, 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 cool. Perfect. So I've prepared this quick demo for us then. So basically this is, we're going to start, I just typed Kedro new on a terminal, Conda environment, then we installed Kedro there. Basically we're going to be facing this as soon as we open this notebook. Sorry, as soon as we type the Kedro new, we open the new project. And here we have our configuration folder, where we have our base with the catalog, the data catalog I was talking about over here. And then the credentials one that I was talking about as well, that holds all your access keys and IDs and everything for your data that is not hosted locally. Then we have some logins, and then all our parameters as well are inside of a YAML file. Then the local is the one that does not get pushed to GitHub. So usually we just put all the credentials inside of local. This is one of the things that we just do it as soon as we open the boilerplate. Then here we have all the data for the project. These layers here are better explained in our data engineering convention. If you'd like to know a little bit more about a data engineering convention, just have a look at our documentation. Everything is there. Then we have docs, a docs folder. We use Sphinx for docs. So basically the only thing, as soon as you build your docs, the only thing you have to do is Kedro build docs, and your docs are going to be there ready for you. Then logs folder, then notebooks. So here I prepared this start notebook for us. This is going to be super quick. I'll open that now. And then this is the meat of our project here. So the source folder, this is where our nodes and pipelines go. This is where our pipelines are actually there. And this is the file that runs our Kedro run. Then there is a few other stuffs over there, a few other things over there like tests. We use PyTests. But yeah, so let's have a look at this Jupyter notebook. So Kedro Jupyter notebook is gonna open that for us. Here we go. And then here, notebooks. Dun, dun, dun. Perfect. So I will use this snippet here just to suppress those errors. Then we are using Python, the Python library requests. Then we're requesting all the data for this is coming from HTTP request. There is for a, if you heard my story, you know that there is Elsa's working on a Singapore weather station. This is Elsa's notebook. So she wants to know all the data, all the time series for this specific data here. So we request this data, then assign it to a variable, then print the JSON file. This is going to take a little bit of time because it's quite a long file. But then you can see, it's going to come back in a second. So then you can see we do a little bit, I love when this happens. It's just so good when it works. Then we have a little bit of data cleaning process where, so we have a look at the JSON file. You see there is a little metadata. There's stations here with unique IDs for each one of them, that they have names, locations with latitude and longitude. And then down here, you can see that there are timestamps and readings for each one of those stations with the station ID and the temperature for that day. What ELSA really wants is the data for that specific, for this specific station with those timestamps. So temperatures and timestamps, simple, easy. So let's, ooh, what happened here? Ooh, I know what happened here. Cool. So we're referring here to cell number 6. Cool. So here, for those of you who don't know, this here allows you to just grab the data that has been exposed in another cell of the notebook and just use it over. That's the reason why it's so much faster. Cool. So then here we have our series, our time series. And then, well, what better thing to do than to do a plot with this station data? So we use pandas and we generate, why are you doing this to me? Oh, I don't have pandas. I wonder if I have to put this in another cell. No, I don't. Wonderful. So here we go. Our graph. Simple stuff. And then let's go to the meat of the business. So how do we convert this into, yeah, I'm running out of time, so let me go faster. So how do we convert this into a Kedro project? So first of all, we need to make sure that these are functions. So Kedro works with pure Python functions. The way I did it was basically, I just copied everything. If you look over here, I just copied the same things that are here, and these 3 cells, and wrapped into a function. Here we go. That's it. And then I did the same thing for the other one, for the choosing state. I could call the choose station function. It's all over here. I made a variable for the notebook cell number, and I thought was a little bit better practice, and wrapped everything around that function. So to convert this, we basically go view. So view, cell toolbar, and tags. Then you make sure you baptize this as a node. So here we go. If you do node, it becomes a node, and then a node here as well. So we close this, then we go back into our PyCharm. Let me, where is PyCharm this time? Cool. We go back into PyCharm, and you're messing up with my, sorry, a quick confusion with virtual environments. Cool. So if you do Kedro, Jupyter, no, Kedro, Jupyter, converge all, and if it works, it's gonna, wonderful. So it's asking me here. So it's grabbing the Jupyter notebook. It's searching the entire project directory, looking for the Jupyter notebook, and then it's telling me that it's gonna output on this file. But keep in mind that I already have this file over here because I did this before. This file over here that has the same name of the notebook with all my functions inside. So it's asking me if I want to override it or not. I'm gonna say no, because I'm running out of time. But you can see how it's done, right? If you have any questions, just hit me up after this. So basically, we have this here that you can see it's exactly the same as our functions over here. It's basically just an easy way of converting it. Then how to make this into a Kedro project. So you need to make sure that you go into hooks, that you import your functions here, and then that you build your nodes. So I wrote this code already because I knew I was going to be running out of time, but I walk you through it quite quickly. So here we have node 1, where we get this node get temp data, where the input is none and the output is raw temperatures. Then we have this other node where I choose the station, is the other function that takes as inputs a raw temperature that is output from here, and the station ID, that is the actual name of that station, and outputs the temperature. And then to output that plot, I would need a third node that doesn't necessarily have a function. So I just use a lambda function here and tell to plot, to use matplotlib to plot this as the temperature plot. Then the way the schedule knows where all this is you go into the catalog. You go into the catalog, and then here you have raw temperature. There is a JSON data set that is coming from the requests. This is the data, the file path, and the temporary path that is a matplotlib type. And this is the file path. So if I go here then and do a Kedro run, dun, dun, dun. So it's showing me that it's running the first node, get temporary data. Usually when I do this using Zoom, everything crashes. So go, everything run, wonderful. So here we have then, so there is all the steps. So 1 node out of 3, then 3 nodes out of 3, and then, sorry, 2 nodes out of 3, and then 3 nodes out of 3. It's ran. So if you want to see that same graph, since I said here, 8 report temp, we go back here into data and then reporting, and then here's our graph. You see, it looks like a little bit of overwork for this, but imagine if you have all your data cleaning functions there and you need to make sure that they're all in pipelines. Also, I'm just illustrating. And then I have something cool to show you as well. Now, that is our visualization tool. So if you look here, you can see that we have all our functions there. So we have our get temporary data function, and that is outputted into raw temp. Then for the choose station function, we have an input as inputs raw temp and station ID that go inside here, and then they output the temperature, and then the temperature is inputted into our lambda function and outputs the temporary plot. If you'd like, for example, to see if where the raw temp, for example, works, you could just select that node and you can see that the parameter station, the param station here doesn't, it's off, which means this raw temperature node does not influence into the parameter station ID. This doesn't actually make that much difference when you look into a DAG that is this small, but if you look into a much bigger DAG, it's easy to see. Cool. So now, how long do I still have? Let me see, 2 minutes. So real quick, let me go back here. And show you then. So we have a few plugins out of the box for support. We have Kedro Viz that I just showed you. This is the official link for a much bigger visualization that you can just play with it. It's quite a cool DAG. You can use Docker to just ship your projects, and you can also hook your Kedro project to Airflow. So we are open source, but we are enterprise open source. So we are actively maintained by Quantum Black, and there is a team of Kedro core developers behind all this amazingness. We are on Stack Overflow. We are on GitHub. We love pull requests. Our documentation is also, we try our best with our documentation. Please give us some feedback. If you try, there's something you can understand, just make a pull request and send us a question. Then I want to just give you a quick show on the Kedro community. So we have a few very, very, very active contributors like DP Amand that built a plugin for us. There's also Mr. Data Engineer 1, there's Tam, and that has a YouTube channel on Kedro, doing some quirky stuff with Kedro. Then we have Waylon Walker. There is one of our oldest users that also been writing some cool stuff. And Yusuke Minami is a data scientist in Singapore, and he's also a Kaggle master. And he built Pipeline X that is supported by Kaggle. I mean, is compatible with Kaggle, and he also built Kaggle Lift if you're looking for something to do like the heavy lifting of your data pipelines. And one of the coolest things that he built for us is like this comparison graph with all these different data pipelines tools. It's quite interesting. You can have a look at that on his GitHub profile. And then there is a new Kaggle community channel that came out this week. We're super, super, super happy about it. It's a channel that you can just go there and ask questions, publish your use case, share your data pipeline worries, brag about the projects you did, anything you want to do. We're more than happy to have you there. Just hop in. And then there are mentored sprints as well coming. We have one next week on PyCon India, then there's JupyterCon, and then we're also on PyData Global Sprints. And we also have a super cool Spotify playlist, Kaggle Lounge. Please hop in as well. That's the link over there. And we in QB are hiring. So if you're interested on working for this super cool company, you could be producing your next open source tool. Just give me a shout after this. And yes, that's all. I'm done now. I'm stopped sharing.
Thank you very, very much, Liz, for that engaging talk. I think the problems that you highlighted early on, they're very acute and very painful for a lot of us. With that, so we have a question that's posted, and we probably have a couple of minutes for questions. So feel free to ask, and Liz, I'll let you take it away with the questions. We have lost our speaker.
I have one question, maybe that gives the audience time to think of more. So Lais, thanks for the talk. I'm curious. At my workplace, we have constantly discussions about whether we should open source this software and that software, right? I mean, it's a lot of work for the developers at Quantum Black. You need to write a lot more documentation. You need to give support to your open source users. You need to respond to issues on GitHub. It's a huge investment, right? So what do you know? What was the reason for Quantum Black or McKinsey to go open source with Kaggle? What are you hoping for?
Absolutely. So the reason why we open source Kaggle, that's a great question, by the way. So yeah, the reason why we open source Kaggle initially was because we were using the Kaggle for our data analytics project in consultancy, and then we were leaving the companies, and our customers were like, "Oh, but wait, you're leaving already? Like, what about now? What do we do?" We need support, and we're like, well, we can't really give you support just for this specific tool. What we can do is open source it. So we decided then to open source it for the benefits of our stakeholders. It was a lot of work. I wasn't in the company at the time, but I've heard there was a lot of work. Yes. And it's still a lot of work, especially trying to build a community around it. There is a lot of work to be done, absolutely. But well, I personally believe that the future of software is open source. That's how we're going to actually get to make a difference and engage with people and build, not only share features, but actually to share knowledge. Software needs to be open source.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
And
there's one question in the chat. So there's a question: would this Kaggle tutorial work with Google Colab as well?
Google Colab. What is Google Colab? I'm sorry, but I'm not familiar with it.
It's Google's way of running machine learning notebooks in the cloud with Google magic behind it.
I actually wasn't aware of that. Well, so Kedro, to use Kedro, you need to install it locally. What we do allow you to do is having your, one of the most awesome things is you can have your data stored remotely, but a Kedro needs to be installed locally, unless, I guess, you're having, like, if you have a server hosted somewhere and you want to install Kedro on that server, but I'm not really sure how that would work. So I hope that answers your question, João.
I think this sounds like a exciting new plugin waiting to be developed.
It could be, it could be. So then I have another question here of someone, KQJN. So how does Kedro handle classes? So Kedro is built on pure Python functions. So basically the same way that you write your scripts with classes is how classes should be written with Kedro. How it works under the hood, I would love to sit down and show you some UML graphs, and we could talk about a little bit of under the hood stuff. But I wouldn't be comfortable like just telling you right now what is it, the specific steps of how Kedro operates. Basically what I can tell you in a nutshell is you go Kedro run goes into run.py, and run.py does a few checks like the conf folder for your configuration, so base local. Then it runs into hooks.py to find how your pipelines are structured and what are the functions in your pipeline, and then goes into your node folder looking for the actual functions to run your nodes. And that's kind of how Kedro Viz also works. But yeah, for now, that's it. Does that answer your questions? Do you want me to go into more detail, maybe?
I have maybe a quick technical question. So you, on the last slide in the plugins, you showed this Kedro Airflow plugin. But if you don't install that, what is used under the hood to run the pipeline? Can you talk about that?
Cool. Yeah. So to run the actual pipelines is we have the Kedro Airflow is just a plugin that you can plug it in if you like to see, if you use Airflow to show your DAGs, for example, and then you're like not really in the mood to use Kedro Viz. So you can use that, and you can also use for deployment. So like you can push your CI/CD with using Airflow a little bit better. You can use containers with Airflow as well. But the way that Kedro runs under the hood, so basically I have this cool UML graph here. Let me see if I can find it for you. So basically you go Kedro run is the trigger. So you go Kedro run. Then when you go Kedro run, we have this run.py file. And then that run.py file is the one that has all the runners. So if you think about Kedro as a train, then the run.py would be the actual engine that would make the entire thing run. So let me just get my phone to get this authorization thing going on, this push here, so I can show you that UML graph. Yes, so then after that, so then inside of Kedro, inside of run.py, it runs, so it goes into the conf folder, so it goes into base, conf folder, so local and base, looking for specifics inside of those. So looking for your data catalog, there's the first thing you're gonna need to have there, so your data entries, so the data entries for your code. And it does as well. So, and then it goes into your pipelines folder to see how the pipelines are structured. So what is the order and what are the dependencies? And then after it kind of grasps that, it goes into each one of the nodes folder, the nodes.py files, and look for those functions and see what exactly is the transformation that the data has to do. I am not as technical as I wish I was, to answer you that question the way that I think you deserve. But if you can you see my screen? Oops.
Yep.
Cool. So here, if I can give a little bit more. No. Don't know how this works. Maybe if I open this like this. Let me see. Sorry about that.
Sorry, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I put you on the spot by asking you to lift up the lid, but I'm more than happy to dive into the excellent documentation that you have.
We're proud of our documentation, to be honest with you. Our technical editor is putting a lot of effort into that, and she's quite cool as well. So yeah, here it is. If you're still interested, so there it is. So first it goes into the execution. So you execute is basically the casual run. It goes into the run. It looks for the data catalog and the actual pipeline. And then inside of the data catalog, you're going to have your data sets, there are your dictionaries, and then you're going to have a load and a save. And then, so loads from and saves to the data set. And then up here, you actually have your carriages of your train. So how it runs from one side to another. Yeah. Any other questions?
So I don't see any more questions. I think that means that we're officially at the end of our meetup.
Cool.
So ladies, thank you again. And also thank you to Ellie, our previous speaker. So both very interesting talks. To everybody, thank you for attending. Both the slides from the meetup and the recording will be made available later on. And in the meantime, please give our speakers a virtual thumbs up, leave a nice comment, follow them on Twitter, check out their work on GitHub, and yeah, basically stay in touch. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting. Thank you for the great reception. And thank you, Bruce, as well, for saying he's gonna try Kedra on his next project. I love it. Thank you. And I hope you had as much fun as I did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.